Hi, welcome to the Ascended Workplace. I'm Rebecca from Ascended Consulting, and I'm here today with a special guest. This is Jack Foust. He is an HR professional. So, Jack, we're just going to roll right into it. So, can you start us off by sharing a bit of your HR background and the types of employees or industries you've worked with most and how long you've been in the field?
Yeah, so my HR background's definitely unique. So I actually went to school for design, and I worked in the design field for quite a few years. And then through hiring and having my own team, I got exposure to the recruiting side of things, really enjoyed that. Through recruiting, got me involved in HR, and then just the whole kit and caboodle of all of that. So I have worked in the custom apparel industry, manufacturing, sales, luxury sales, most recently within the accounting industry. So there's not a lot that I haven't done. So there's a good breakdown of many industries that I've recruited for.
So you have a wide range to pull from of knowledge and experience, and it's not just one type of team member or employee. You've got the whole field going there. So I love that.
Yeah, all the way from entry level to high level leadership. So it's been a lot.
So what's one trend that you've noticed and how the workforce has evolved over the past decade?
I started recruiting before COVID. And so I feel like that's the delineation point of like I started recruiting before COVID and then it was after COVID. And so I think the job market got really rocky, and then got better and then got rocky again. So one thing that I've really noticed is people have become much more savvy on what roles to apply for and why. So I think that savviness is a direct result of COVID. They've just become a lot more savvy on what kind of roles they should apply for, and what roles would be the best fit for them.
That sounds like a really good shift.
Yeah, I think it mostly has been a really good shift. I think the downside of that is I think a lot of the job market now, and specifically roles that I'm hiring for, are a lot more saturated. So I think that's the downside of it. But again, I think the candidate appropriateness is getting better.
So when did you first start to notice that Gen Z employees brought something distinct to the workplace?
Yeah, I think it's when I started recruiting in the accounting industry. That's when I had the most exposure to Gen Z. That's when I'm spending a lot of the time on college campuses, 2023, 2024, 2025. That's when I really got my exposure to it. So I think you hear a lot of other people say Gen Z hiring, they lack soft skills, they lack this, they lack that. I think that's anecdotal from what I've noticed. Like they are the most honest and authentic applicants that I think I've ever talked to, which I really appreciate. I think a lot of other generations want to tell me what I want to hear, and I don't feel like that's the same thing for Gen Z.
I love that that's one of the traits that you brought out, because one of the things that we work on a lot at Ascended is helping people understand the strengths of Gen Z and how to work with their strengths instead of always focusing. You hear a lot of complaints about Gen Z in the workplace. So I love that idea of the authenticity, because that is something they really truly care about, is authenticity. So they bring that to the table and they expect it from the places where they work as well.
I think they also ask the best questions. So I think compared to other generations, I think everybody asks good questions, but Gen Z's questions are very good. Like they really want to find out what they're getting into.
They really care about that work-life balance. And I think they really care about feeling like where they're working matters to them and that they're going to find what they're looking for in their workplace. So I think that comes through probably then. I haven't, ever been a part of the interview process with a Gen Z, so I wouldn't know that. So it's really fun to hear this insight and see how it aligns with what we already know about Gen Z.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you made any changes in your onboarding approach to better engage Gen Z?
For me, whenever I first started working on onboarding plans, they were very like handholdy, right? They were just constant contact, getting you through the system, making sure you learn all of these things. And then as I moved along, I felt like there needed to be a marriage between like hand holding and being there as like a strong support structure. But then I think there's also needs to be a piece of self-determination. So there needs to be a piece of it that you're off doing on your own. And so that's something that I've tried to marry together and give them that support, give them that safety net, but also here's the things that you're responsible for. And a lot of the time, I think it's when we do that, it kind of proves us right that we made the right hire. Because if they're able to do that, we understand that they are kind of like self-sufficient, and that's something we look for.
And I often say that when we have high expectations, people generally rise to meet them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So what strategies or training methods have you found effective for helping younger employees build communication, accountability, and professional confidence? And I feel like you've already touched on that a little bit with this kind of hybrid mode of, here's exactly like the high support, but also the high expectation.
The self-determination and the self-reliance piece of the onboarding that I really like is we have these plans that are called 30, 60, 90-day plans. And what it does, it really just outlines expectations for your first 30 days, your first 60 days, and your first 90 days. And each section, so in like the 30 days, there's specific tasks they have to complete. So it's like, here's the training video. When you're done doing that, connect with this person. When you're done connecting this person, connect with this person. And what it does, it forces them to use their calendar, use the chat, walk over to that person, get to know them in the office, get used to looking at where everything is on the site and watch those videos. And so through that plan, it allows them to get acclimated to things that they don't even understand that they're getting acclimated to. And that's where that self-determination comes in, but also they're reaching out to other individuals as part of this plan, and that's the support part of the plan. So that's something that we've really implemented, and we've seen a lot of really good results from that.
And it sounds like it also provides them with very clear expectations in advance, that they're not wondering what's expected of me. What do I need to do? It sounds like it's outlined really clearly.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's something that we try to accomplish.
Do you ever have people who struggle with it?
Yeah, there's definitely people that struggle with it. I would say those that are more introverted struggle with the outreach piece of it. But that is why we want to pair them with a coach and a go-to person, something that they're more familiar with, to allow them to bounce something off of them before they have to go out to the entire company and do parts of their plan. But we've definitely seen that, and that happens, and that's to be expected.
I like how you said you pair them with someone, and that's such a great strategy to kind of give them that extra added support. And I like like I said, I like that there's this idea of this is what you need to do that's very clearly communicated, but that you also provide that backup support for when they might not be able to do it on their own in the way that they need to immediately.
And I'm introverted myself, so a lot of the things that I put in place are like, how would I feel about this?
That makes sense. Yeah, putting yourself in their shoes. And I do believe, like you said, because one of the things people often say about Gen Z, and you mentioned it, is that people complain about a lack of soft skills and things. But it sounds like your training incorporates some of that soft skill, because you're asking them to take a little bit of that initiative, to have that face-to-face conversation, to do that follow-up. So it forces them to develop some of those skills as they're going.
Yeah, that is something we try, but we also try to talk about soft skills within the interview process too. That's something we try to interview against.
So you ahead of time already know whether or not they've got the skill they need.
Yeah, or at least the best guess.
The best guess. And if they come in and they seem to be lacking at some once they get started, what are some specific strategies that you've used to help them to develop those?
It's going to be follow-up and feedback. So we want to make sure we're following up consistently. Like I said, I really like the plans that we put in place, but if you don't have action behind it, if you don't have checks behind it, they're just not going to work. Some people are not going to need check. They're just going to do it themselves and they're going to finish it. Others are going to be like me, and they're going to be introverted, and they might just pause and freeze on certain things. And so following up with them consistently, and then feedback. And when I say feedback, it's not so much like you're not doing this thing. It's like, hey, this thing isn't happening, and here's the effect of it, right? So that's how we want to approach feedback.
I love it. You're preaching our message here of the consistency, clear expectations, follow through, feedback, and consistency within the feedback. So I love all of that. It's like I gave you a script, but I didn't.
I know. Yeah, there's no script here.
So I think we may have answered this, but I'm just going to ask it in case we get slightly different response. So have you seen examples of Gen Z employees really rising to the occasion when given the right kind of support, and what made the difference?
Yeah, I think the hardest thing to balance is how often do I reach out for help and ask a question? And then how often or how much do I spin my wheels before I do that? And that is the hardest thing to balance when you're coming right out of school. Because I think school does set you up for success, but they sometimes lack those real world scenarios. And so those that are able to strike that balance early on do an incredibly good job, and they really rise to the occasion in whatever role that they're in. And I've seen that happen across industries. So it doesn't matter what industry you're in. If you can balance those two things, I think you do really well.
Do you have any strategies you use with the Gen Z employee to help them figure out that balance?
Not necessarily specifically targeted at Gen Z, but it is more along the lines of like, I know that you are new here. I understand that this is extremely stressful and it's a brand new environment that you're just not used to. And I think making sure that that is acknowledged consistently is really important. I want them to know that I know that they're vulnerable. That's really important. And I want to make sure that the leaders know that that person is vulnerable and they can use that extra help. So that's really important.
Yeah, I think that's a great strategy. Sometimes people talk about Gen Z having different expectations about their timeline for growth and promotion. How do you address that with them up front about the timeline and how they can meet goals if they have career goals? How do you set realistic expectations for them? And how do you help them to know whether or not they're on pace to meet those goals?
Just looping back to feedback too. I think feedback is really important. So I've been at places where feedback happens once a year, and I don't think that's a great structure to be in. And so for me, I really think feedback should be happening really consistently, if not quarterly, probably monthly. If I had my way, it would be happening weekly. So really consistent feedback, making sure that they know they are on the right track or they are not on the right track, and allowing them to kind of feel that out and understand where they're at. So like I said, we have a kind of like a coaching program that we want to make sure we pair somebody up with. Normally that person's 1 to 2 levels above them. And it's encouraged for them to pick their brain to be like, how'd you get where you are? What can I do to get there? Once people are out of that program, normally after 2 years, then they have the ability to enroll in like a mentorship program. And it's very similar, but it's meant to help you advance further along in your career. And so number one, you have to set those expectations up early. You have to give really consistent feedback. And then you have to put a structure in place to make sure that everybody knows that even though it might feel like it's a really long time, it's not a very long time, and you're learning and you're growing.
When you are providing feedback to Gen Z, do you feel that you alter that feedback from how you would provide feedback from, say, a Gen X or, someone from what's fondly referred to as the boomer generation? Do you feel that you have to alter the way you provide feedback between the generations?
Yeah, I want to go back to the honesty. I think Gen Z really just appreciates clear and honest feedback. I cringe a little bit when I hear people say, I love the sandwich method, like good feedback, constructive feedback, good feedback. I really do despise that model. I'm not a huge fan of it. And I really just like being very clear on like, these are the things that you need to work on. These are the things that you're doing really well. These are the things you need to do to get to the next step. And I feel like Gen Z is just really appreciates that honesty, and they don't want it to be sugarcoated.
I think that's really good advice and very useful. So when you find that you have high performing Gen Z talent, retention, there isn't the same idea today about company loyalty, right? It used to be like you get in with a company and you just stick with them until you die, right? That's and that has shifted from generation to generation. But I would say, especially with Gen Z, there's this, looking for the next best thing that is out there. And so what do you do when you have great Gen Z talent? What are some strategies you're using to make sure to hold on to them?
So I think when we talk about feedback, a lot of the time when I'm in the position I'm in, I'm thinking about feedback from the top down. So I think there's a lot of the times what companies miss is feedback from the bottom up. And I think and you kind of spoke to it, right? Gen Z, they want to advance. They know that they have a voice. They know they have things that they feel like they can improve. And so when that avenue is missing for them to give feedback, that's not a great sign. And so that is something that we want to do to address that attrition. But then at the other end of it too, there's only so much you can do to address it. And sometimes the trend is going to be to move to other positions and find something that's a better fit for you. And one thing that I've done is try to celebrate that. So like if somebody leaves, like I like to congratulate them and let them know that we really do wish them the best. And then if anything ever comes up or we can cross paths in the future, I think that's great too. Too many times I have left a position and it's been a bad taste in my mouth because there's a little bit of animosity. And I always thought, wouldn't it be nice if it was like a good departure and then we could potentially reconnect at a later date? So those are the things that I've tried to do in my role is, number one, let's do things that we can to address it. And number two, if somebody's going to leave for a better opportunity, celebrate that. It should be celebrated.
I love that. Such a smart move, because as they develop more skills and they go out there and they try other things, if they have great memories of where they worked with you and, as you said, a position comes available at a higher level that they're interested in where you are, where they were, they might come back.
Yeah. I had a manager before that I asked the question to, and I said, we had a really high performing team member tell me that they got a new position and that they're leaving on this date. And I had a meeting with my manager and I said, what should we do? And she said, congratulate them. And I was like, that just like unlocked it for me. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. And I've kind of taken that with me.
And additionally, as you said, they're super open and honest, and they're going to be talking to their friends and their new coworkers and different peers. And if they have great things to say about their experience with you, then that's going to help with recruitment and acquiring other great talent. What is it that you do that when you're trying to bridge generational differences? What would be a piece of advice you could give our listeners?
Put them all together. There's no other way to do it. I mean, you can host get to know you sessions, you can meet with somebody one-on-one, but until those individuals work together, they're not going to understand what the other person is bringing to the table. So put them together as much as possible, right? So I think it's not a tip or a trick. It's just put them together.
I agree. I think that is very effective. When you get on a team with someone, you have to learn how to work and how to figure it out. So if you're always kind of avoiding it and trying to hedge it off, you kind of miss the opportunity for that little bit of friction that can really create growth. What's one practice or policy you've implemented that's had the biggest impact on engagement or culture?
So I was working for a manufacturing company. It was like a manufacturing / design company. And one of the things that we put in place that had been absent for quite some time was a company-wide meeting. And we did it on a quarterly basis. And so in the past, they had done company-wide meetings where the CEO just kind of stood in the middle of everybody in the office and really just talked for an hour. And that's great. That person has great insight. I understand that you want to talk directly to your staff, and I think that's fine. However, if you are the one that's always talking, nobody's going to be engaged in that. And so one thing that we did is we made it so like each different leader within each department had their own section that they kind of passed off to, and then they presented. We also added an audio visual element where we're going through like specific slide decks, and we're going through successes, and we're going through failures, and we're going through gaps, and we're going through different milestones for the individual employees. And so we started doing that on a quarterly basis, and the engagement got better, the retention got better, and people were actually looking forward to those meetings. And so that's something that I feel like had a really big impact for the individuals on the team. And it also made the leaders of the company much more engaged, because now they have a section of a huge meeting that they're going through themselves. So that's something I really, really enjoyed changing and getting people engaged from all levels.
Engagement is such a huge piece within the workplace, and feeling like there's more voice and more perspectives available. All right, last one. I'm going to say, what do you think, because we kind of focus a lot on Gen Z, right? So what do you think you have learned for yourself as a leader by working with Gen Z?
So I think it's like anything else. Whenever you keep hearing something in the news or whatever about a subject, but you yourself don't engage with it, it's really easy for you to form an opinion, negative opinion about something. And then once you start doing it, you realize that like these are just people just like me.
Absolutely.
And so that is exactly kind of the lesson that I learned working directly with Gen Z, because I started recruiting and I was recruiting Gen X and millennials, and that was it. And then you hear all these stories about, oh, Gen Z, they don't have emotional intelligence, and they don't have this, and they don't have that. And then you start recruiting them, and you meet them on college campuses, and you see everything that they take on, and you see the goals that they have and everything that's really important to them. And you realize that they are a person just like you. They want to achieve, they want to get better at many, many things. And they're extremely driven. And I think the one thing that, like I said at the beginning, really sets them apart is they are extremely honest, and they want honesty back. And that's something that really, it inspired me.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights today. I think it's such a great perspective on working with Gen Z, but also across generations and in the workplace at large. So thank you so much for your time today.
Of course.